Hey, how's everyone doing? I was thinking this week about what we're doing here, And it kind of hit me like, we can't do life alone. And you notice how I said we? Because maybe you're here for the first time or you're at church for the first time in a long time, and you notice I didn't say you can't do life alone, because there's not two kinds of people. There's not like church people and other people. There's just people. And we can't do life alone. And to me, that kind of means two different things. Number one, it means that we can never lose sight of the unseen. That life is actually lived from the inside out. In other words, it's good to look after your body, eat healthy, work out, do all those things, and that's important. It's good to look after your mind, read a book, take a class, all those things. But life is really lived from the inside out. And God wants to change you from the inside out. He wants to change you from a soul level. And next thing you know, as you focus on God, as you come here, as you read your Bible, as you work on these things, all of a sudden you see these things growing up in your life, manifesting themselves: love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, self-control. Second thing I was thinking of is like, we need each other. People sometimes go, well, Southside Church is a big church. I think we're a small church with lots of people, because in big churches I think disconnection happens, and connection is so important to us. And even if you're here for the first time or for the first time in a long time at church, man, I would love it if you get connected. ASAP. Jump into a small group on your way out at the Next Step Center, or sign up to be part of a serving team, because we need each other. And we're in this series called Unravelling, and it's a series that kind of centers around a story. It's a story about a time that Jesus walked into this little town called Bethany. It's about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem, and as Jesus walks into Bethany, Lazarus, one of Jesus' really close friends, is dead. Well, not only is he dead, he's been dead and buried for 4 days. And it's an amazing story, because Jesus walks into Bethany, Lazarus is dead and buried, but because Jesus gets involved, Lazarus goes from dead and buried to alive and well. And months ago, when I began thinking and praying about this series, I thought about you and I thought about me, and I thought of, like, what if we could become fully, completely, and totally alive? What if we could live fully, completely, and totally ourselves? And it's interesting, because we're at the part of the Lazarus story today that we're going to talk about the shortest verse in the Bible. The shortest verse in the Bible, and you're going to hear a perspective on the shortest verse in the Bible that you've never heard before, no matter how long you've been going to church. And it's going to change the way that you view the Savior named Jesus, who stepped into human history so that you could be fully, completely, and totally alive, and a God who created you, who designed you, who thought you up to be you, the fully, complete, and total version of you. So let's jump into the story in John chapter 11. Jesus walks into Bethany. Lazarus has been dead and buried for 4 days. When Mary, the sister of Lazarus, reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. John 11, verse 35, Jesus wept. Some of you knew that because you grew up going to Sunday school. And your grade 3 Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Phillips, told you that whichever kid memorized the most verses in the Bible would get an O. Henry chocolate bar, and so you went after John 11:35 right away. Jesus wept. 1 Thessalonians 5:16, rejoice always. 5:17, pray continually. Okay, so you had those nailed, right? But I want to suggest to you today that it's a little bit more than that. It's a lot more than that. I told you last week that everything that Jesus said, if you study his life, if you study his stories, you'll find that everything that Jesus said, he said for a reason. Everything that Jesus did, he did for a reason. Let me go further. Everything Jesus said, he said it the way that he did for a reason, and everything he did it the way that he did it for a reason. Like, there's a message behind the message, there's a message behind the methods. Scholars will tell you that Jesus is God incarnate. In other words, the Bible tells us that Jesus stepping into human history is God putting on flesh and blood and moving into our neighborhood. So if you want to understand the kindness of God, if you want to understand the grace of God, if you want to understand the mercy of God, if you want to understand the love of God, then learn more about Jesus. It's really important, because before Jesus stepped into human history, the predominant view of God was that of the Greeks. And the Greeks had a word to describe God, and that word was apatheia. Does that word sound familiar to you? Apatheia. It's the same root word, the Greek word, where we get the word apathetic. So the predominant view of God when Jesus stepped into human history is God is disconnected. God is removed. God is ambivalent. God is aloof. God is definitely not passionate, and he is absolutely not compassionate. But that's not the God of the Bible. That's not the true God. That's not the God, with all due respect, created you on purpose with a purpose for a purpose, and part of his purpose for your life, part of his love for your life, is that you would be here today. See, because John 11:35 says, Jesus wept. And the question that I really want to get into today is this: why? Why? The answer is actually given to us in John 11:33. Jesus wept, John 11:33 says, because he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. But there's actually an incomplete translation. The Greek word where John 11:33 comes from, the Greek word that they translated into deeply moved in spirit and troubled, is actually the word embrimome. I'm using all these Greek words. Aren't I smart? Isn't it? It's just so impressive. I'm just so impressed with myself right now. It's amazing. High five. Okay, so, but I need you to know that apatheia and embrimome are like polar opposites. No similarities at all. If I had to give you a description of what embrimome means, it would be this: a wild horse tossing its mane and audibly snorting in anger, preparing to rear and strike out at an enemy. You've never been taught this. You've been going to church your whole life, some of you, and you never learned this. And so you've never received a complete perspective of God. Jesus wept. Not because he was sad, not because he was nostalgic, not because he was discouraged. Jesus wept because he was audibly and visibly angry. Abraham Lincoln once said this: you can tell the greatness of a person by what makes them angry. You can tell the greatness of a person by what makes them angry. And I would add, and the action that is produced by their anger. You can tell the greatness of a person by what makes them angry and the action that is produced by that anger. So here's my question for you today. What makes you angry? See, as I thought about that for myself, the list became somewhat embarrassing. Slow Wi-Fi makes me angry. Non-functional key fobs make me angry. When I go to the gym and I want to use the elliptical trainer, but everyone is already using the elliptical trainers and I have to use the stationary bike, that actually makes me angry. And now you're laughing at me in your head because I use an elliptical trainer, and that also makes me angry, okay? But you might notice the theme behind all my anger. Me. My comfort, my ease, my convenience, my ego, me, and my. So what makes you angry? Because I will tell you this, I do have a deeper level of anger. I have another level of anger that is reserved for more than key fobs and elliptical trainers. My deeper level of anger is reserved for when someone that I really love is hurting or threatened. That's a deeper level of anger for me. Specifically speaking, maybe my wife and my kids. That's another level of anger. I remember a few months ago, Corinne and I drove out to Kelowna to watch our son Gabe play college basketball. His first season of college basketball, And his CBC team was going to play Okanagan College, and the schedule was that they would play on Friday night, and then they would play again on Saturday afternoon, same two teams. So I know that Okanagan College didn't do a ton of scouting because by the end of the first half on Friday night's game, Gabe had 31 points. Okay, and so what they started doing near the end of the first half is because Gabe was scoring a lot, they did this thing called face guarding. Face guarding in basketball is just when you stop looking at the ball or anything else and you just run and you face the guy, which is awesome. It's a good thing to do, but it didn't work great because Gabe still had 31 by the end of the first half. But they came up with a new strategy at the beginning of the second half, and that was to rotate two guys on Gabe. And they got really physical. So they were punching Gabe, and they were elbowing him in the head, and they would trip him. And one of the guys, he was an eye-poking specialist. So no kidding, his goal was to poke Gabe in the eye as much as he could. It didn't really make me angry, to be honest. It's just basketball, right? You score 31 in the first half. Congratulations, here you go. Now, it did make Corinne angry. Okay, so Corinne actually had to leave the gym because she was going to physically assault the referee or the eye-poking specialist, okay? Which is good for all of us that she left, you know? But I did end up getting angry, actually, because the story didn't really end there. What happened was there was an assistant coach on the Okanagan College bench who took special interest in Gabe in the second half. He was about 6'4", 6'5", about 30, 35 years old. And he took so much interest in Gabe that he had a pet name for Gabe, and that pet name was Little B. But it wasn't B. Okay, anyways, you get what I'm saying. Okay, so he screamed that at the top of his lungs all half long, all second half. And so when Gabe would get knocked down, he would laugh and he would cheer. Every time Gabe came close to their bench, he would stand up, flex, and act like he was going to go after Gabe. And so now I started to get just a little bit angry. And then there was this one moment where Gabe got knocked down right in front of their bench, and this guy stood up and he started yelling, and you could hear it across the whole arena. I can't even sanitize it enough to repeat it to you, to be honest. But he ended his statement by calling Gabe once again a little B, and he was so into it and so vehement that from across the gym I could see the spit flying out of his mouth. Now at that point, I got angry. Okay? And I got angry so much that I actually, out of interest's sake, I looked at my hand, and my hand was shaking. And if you had talked to me in that moment, my lip would have been quivering, and there was tears in my eyes. And it wasn't because I was sad. It wasn't because I was discouraged. It wasn't because I was nostalgic. I was crying because I was angry. I got over it, actually. The game was over. We went with a bunch of Gabe's teammates and some friends of ours from Kelowna to Red Robin. And we had bottomless fries, which for me always puts me in a good mood, you know? It's nothing like some... But the story doesn't completely end there. I kind of in some ways wish that it would have, but it didn't, because the next day I'm walking into the arena and the assistant coach from Okanagan College is walking in at the same time I am. I decided not to say anything, but I had some friends with me who were from Kelowna, and it turns out that he knows them, so he came over and they're talking, and his name was Connor, and so they said, "Hey Connor, this is Gabe Manis's dad, Mike." And he kind of looked at me and he smirked and he put out his hand. I had my hands in my pockets, and I didn't take my hands out of my pockets, but I did take a step closer to Connor. And I said, "So your team's terrible, right?" Like, it's hard to watch, Connor. I'm just wondering, as an assistant coach, are you not ashamed to be associated with such a joke? I'm not proud of that at all. I'm not. And if I had it to do over again, there's a fairly decent chance that I would do it differently, you know? But what I didn't do is I didn't end the statement the way I wanted to by referring to him, Connor, as a little B. Didn't do that, okay? She's clapping. Way to go, Mike. You great self-control, Pastor Mike. Well done. I'm not really sure how to segue that story, to be honest with you. John 11:35 says, Jesus wept. And it wasn't because he was sad or nostalgic or discouraged. And it wasn't this superficial anger that I had towards Coach Connor, but Jesus does have a special level of anger reserved for times when those he loves are hurting or threatened. Jesus wept because he walked into Bethany and he saw Mary and Martha and he saw their tears. And he saw the people and he saw the darkness and he saw the pain and he saw the brokenness and that's a problem. And he wept because he was angry. He wept because that's not the way that it was supposed to be. That's not the way that it is supposed to be. See, in the beginning, God created the universe, the galaxies and the solar system and our planet, the oceans and the mountains and the forests and the rivers. He created the birds that swim or the fish, the birds that swim also, which is awesome. Come on, man. Thank you. Penguins, that's what I meant. I love you guys, man. Okay, so first service people would never have helped me out that way. I'm kidding. But God looked at everything he created, he said, it's good. And then at the pinnacle of creation, God created people. Men and women in his own image. And he created men and women like you and me to live in relationship with God and with each other, and therefore gave us free will to have dominion, to care for his creation. But somewhere along the line, we read that the first man and the first woman, Adam and Eve, they rejected God and they walked away from him. And I want you to think about that just for a second as Jesus walked into Bethany. Because when we walk away from God, God is hope. You notice how I didn't say God is really hopeful. No, God is hope. So when we walk away from God, we walk into despair. God is light. So when we walk away from God, we walk into darkness. God is peace. When we walk away from God, we walk into chaos. God is wholeness. When we walk away from God, we walk into broken. And finally, God is life. And when we walk away from God, we walk into death. John 11:35 says Jesus wept, not because he was sad or discouraged or nostalgic. He wept because he was angry. Isaiah 53 says this, it was our weaknesses he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. See, God has an infinite capacity to love historically, but also personally. Jesus wept. Jesus wept not only for the people of Bethany, but for the people of Chilliwack. He wept for the sorrow. He wept for the darkness. He wept for the broken. You can tell a lot about a person by what makes them angry and the action that is produced by that anger. It's interesting because I stand up here and we live in a culture that we get angry about dumb things like key fobs and elliptical trainers, you know. But we also have a culture that sometimes gets mad about the right stuff, but really does nothing about it. Like home screen heroes who spend their entire life spamming the internet and telling us everything that makes them angry, but never actually lifting a finger to do anything about anything. See, I would suggest that you can tell a lot about the greatness of a person, not only by what makes them angry, but the action that is produced by that anger. Years ago, Corinne and I led a mission team of young adults down to Haiti to work at an orphanage. In fact, the orphanage that we later were blessed to adopt Bedza and Samuel from. And our mission at that orphanage was, basically three things. Number one, we just wanted to love these kids. These little boys and these little girls that are literally the poorest of the poor in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So we brought down medical supplies and sports equipment and coloring stuff. We prepared a VBS just to, bring them a little joy, bring them a little hope, tell them about Jesus. The second thing that we came down there to do was to build a wall around the orphanage to protect them actually from speeding vehicles and intruders. And the third thing we came down there to do was to build an outdoor kitchen. The orphanage was very overcrowded, so what we wanted to do is move the kitchen facilities outside so that there'd be more room inside. So we arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and we got the lay of the land. We we had a chance to play with the kids and have fun. And as we were walking around the orphanage, we noticed that in the very back corner of this particular orphanage, there was a dog kennel. But the dog kennel wasn't constructed very well. And so what could happen is that these little kids could actually get into the dog kennel. And we noticed right away that once they got into the dog kennel, they did not treat the dogs very well. And for me, I'm a big animal lover, and I said to myself right in that moment, I'm like, we got to fix this kennel. But the truth is, at that time, we needed to do our other three things first because we had a very, very tight timeline. Okay, so anyways, wake up Wednesday morning, it's time to go to work. Time to build the wall and the kitchen and all that stuff. And so we're on our way out after breakfast, and there's a young man and a young woman on our team that say to me, we're not going out to work. I'm like, oh, okay, why? And they said, because we're enraged about the dog kennel thing. I said, same here, like we're going to fix it, but no, we can't go out, we're too angry. Okay, so the rest of the team went out, and I was 42 degrees Celsius that day, and we dug the ditch that would serve as the foundation of the wall. We carried bags of cement and buckets of water, and actually it was an awesome fun day. Met a bunch of the Haitian workers that were working with us, and they stuck around after the work day was over. We played soccer together. It was a lot of fun. So the next morning, Thursday morning, we're on our way to continue our work, and this young man and this young woman say to me, we're not going. I said, it's the kennel thing again? Yeah, we're too angry. I'm like, we're going to fix it, right? Like we're too enraged. Okay? So the rest of us went out, and we worked on the all our projects that day, and came back in, and then the next morning, Friday morning, we're on our way out again, and the young man and the young woman say to me, can't work, can't do it, too angry. Okay? It's fine, we were doing well, we were getting lots done, but I noticed leading up to lunchtime on Friday that the rest of the team was getting a little bit upset. And what I mean by that is I thought that they were going to physically harm the two people that weren't helping out. Okay, so I decided that I needed to do something. So at lunchtime on Friday, I called this young man and the young woman over to me, and I said, man, I see that this dog kennel is just really, really holding you up, and you want to get to it right now, and you don't want to wait for anything else. And he says, yes, and the young man showed me his journal. He'd been journaling. He said in his journal, these kids need to be socialized. Some of their behavior is incorrect, and this orphanage isn't doing enough for them. And I thought to myself, I think they're mostly just trying to keep these kids alive, but okay. And I said, I can see it's a real problem for you, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you as much money as you need. I'm going to hook you up with a translator, and we're going to get a work team for you, and you guys are going to lead, and you're going to build a new kennel. And they looked at me and they said, now that you mention it, I guess the kennel isn't really that big a deal. We can get to it as a team later, can't we? You get it? So you're angry, right? You can tell the greatness of a person by what makes them angry and the action that is produced by that anger. John 11:35 says, Jesus wept when he walked into Bethany, not because he was sad, not because he was discouraged, and not because he was nostalgic, but because he was angry. And he already knew the action that was going to be produced by his anger. Jesus was angry at broken. He was angry at darkness. He was angry at tears. He was angry at mourning. He was angry at death. What's amazing about this story is that just days later, Jesus himself would die. Jesus himself would be resurrected. See, Jesus stepped into human history to take that gap that had been created between God and people like you and me and close it. So when Jesus was betrayed, he was betrayed so that I could be accepted. He was arrested so we could be set free. He was beaten so you could be healed. His body was broken so you could be whole. He died so we can live. He rose so we can too. Jesus stepped into human history to defeat the enemies of death and pain and mourning and darkness and loss. And I know for some of you, you look at me and say, well, why doesn't he do it right now? Why is there still death, and why is there still pain, and why is there still brokenness? Can I give you an easy answer? Because if Jesus ended brokenness and darkness and sin today, I look inside of my life and you know what I see? I see there's some darkness in here. I see there's some brokenness in here. I see there's some sin in here. So if he ended darkness, he'd have to end me, but he's patient. And his victory is certain, and victory is assured. And I will tell you this, that because of Jesus, when you enter into a relationship with Jesus, death for you isn't termination, it's a transition into eternity. Because he was angry enough to do something. And when you lose somebody here on earth, you haven't really lost them at all. You don't have to say goodbye, you say, see you later. John 11:35. Jesus wept. Not because he was sad, not because he was discouraged, but because he was angry. And so now the question is, what makes you angry? And what action is produced by your anger? Man, I've been thinking about this a lot all week. And as I prayed about today, there was a story that came back to me. It's actually a story that I preached about in the very first sermon that I ever preached as the youth pastor of Southside Church. It's a true story. It says this, a number of years ago, on Valentine's Day, a couple was enjoying a romantic drive along a wooded section near Belle Chase, Louisiana. Something white shimmering in the trees caught their eyes. Their investigation led them to a dead teenager hanging from a limb, a white bedsheet knotted tightly around his neck. A farewell note laced with despair was near the trunk of the tree. It was addressed simply to Mom and Dad. He said, I never did develop into a real person, and I cannot tolerate the false and empty existence I've created. What frustrated me most in the last year was that I had built no ties to family or friends. There was nothing of lasting worth and value. I led a detached existence. I am a bomb of frustration and should never marry or have children. It's safest to diffuse the bomb harmlessly now. Simply cremate me as John Doe. Authorities circulated the youth's description and fingerprints to police across the country. He was later buried, unidentified, and unclaimed. See, that's an issue. That's an issue for me. You say, well, that's a pretty extreme example that happened in Louisiana. No, that's an illustration of the kind of despair and darkness and brokenness that's playing out in our city right now. And a couple years it hit me, you know. This city, this is not just the city I live in. This is my city. These are my people. And I'll tell you something, Southside, there should be a special level of anger that comes when those that we are close to are hurting or threatened. I look at this city and I think, man, we can't fix everything. We can't fix everything, right? But surely we can, and we will, and we must do something, no? So we stand up here on a stage and we talk about, man, over the next 2 years we got this expanded vision and we want to bring more hope. Yes, please, and more help. We must, we will do something. No? Like in my city, in your city right now, there are families where there's little boys and little girls and teenagers and young adults diagnosed with a critical illness. And so we established something called the Sunshine Fund. Not because it's a catchy little title and the tattoo is neat, but because even though we know we can't fix everything, at some level we know, right, that we can and we will and we must do something, no? Like in this city, in your city, in your city, in your city, in our city, there's young girls teenagers, early 20s, that they're pregnant and they're desperate and they're isolated, literally all alone. That's an issue, no? And I know that we can't fix everything, but somewhere along the line, we decided that we were going to give and we were going to be generous and we were going to sacrifice because surely we can. Surely we will. Surely we must do something, no? Like, it's easy to stand up here and go, more help and that's catchy, and more hope, but we must. We must. And so when I look at a school like the Chehalis School, where there's these kids in one of the most affluent countries in the world, they are living like literally on the edge of destitution. And so we pour out. I know that we can't fix everything. I get it, but surely we can. Surely we will. Surely we must do something, no? We talk about more hope. Like right here in your city, right here in our city, there's families, there's homes, there's little boys and there's little girls, teenagers, and they're growing up right in the middle of this thing that I call a cycle of sorrow that's been rolling through their family for generations. Broken people, breaking people, hurting people, abused people, abusing people, shattered people, shattering people. And it just rolls on, and that's an issue, no? Like, that's a problem, no? And so when we stand up here and we say we want to bring more hope, here's what I mean. I need them to know about a Jesus who's angry at their broken. He's angry at their shattered. It makes him angry, so angry that it produces an action, and he says, I can and I will do everything. And so we preach that gospel. And I know we're just one group of people and we can't fix everything, but surely we can, and surely we will, and surely we must do something, no? And so we're going to break ground next week, and it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. But please understand, that building, all it is an expression of this for generations to come. I know you're just you, and I'm just me, and we can't fix everything, but for generations, surely we can. Surely we will. Like, surely we must do something now. I'm not angry at you. But I was just thinking, like, what if we got angry together? And what if that anger produced an action? People say to me sometimes, oh, the church just wants your money and they just want you to serve. Oh, absolutely I do. We really, really do. Because I know we can't fix everything. But I also know this, that we can. And we will. And we must do something. Why don't you stand up and we'll pray. Dear Jesus, thank you. Thank you for stepping into human history and showing us both the mercy and the grace and the anger of our God. Thank you that your anger produced action. And I pray that you would give us hearts that break for what breaks yours, that you would give us eyes to see what you notice, and that we would live understanding that you can do anything. And we're just people and we can't fix everything, but we can and we will, and we must do something in your name. Amen. God bless you guys.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to see you at any of our 3 Sunday services held at Sardis Secondary School on Stevenson Road in Chilliwack, British Columbia. For more information, please visit southsidelife.com.